Okay, so up to this point, we have spent at least a couple videos talking about Ahab and the poison that he and his wife Jezebel inflicted upon the northern kingdom of Israel and also infected the southern kingdom of Judah with. If you look at the timeline here, we've talked about Omri, who was Ahab's dad. He started the dynasty. There's Ahab, there is his son Ahaziah. Remember, Ahaziah died early, and so Ahab had another son, Jehoram, who took over as king in his place. Ahab also had a daughter named Athaliah. And so when you go down to the bottom part of this timeline, Ahab and Jehoshaphat made a marriage alliance. Jehoshaphat gave his son Jehoram to be married to Ahab's daughter Athaliah. And so you can see the poison really the Baal worship, I think, is one of the main problems going on here, but you can see that poison that infected the southern kingdom of Judah because Jehoram in the south was married to Ahab's daughter Athaliah. He was infected with it. Ahaziah was their son. He was infected with it. Athaliah herself then sat on the throne and reigned as an illegitimate queen for a period of time. And so here you've got really a bad time. What we're going to do in this video is watch how God cleans up this mess. And this video is called Jehu's Bloody Purge. I want to tell you something about that before we get started. I remember in the fall of 1999, when I was in Old Testament history and geography at Florida College, Shane Scott was my teacher. And I remember this class. Shane was a great teacher anyway, and the timeline that you're looking at now, I got that mostly from him. But there are a lot of things that he did in the class to just make learning fun and memorable. And it really stuck with me. I want to share that with you at the first. What we're going to do as we go through Jehu's Bloody Purge, I even remember from more than 20 years ago that that's what Shane called this class. Uh, During this class, the PowerPoints were new. Like it was new that everybody was using screens and projection, all that stuff. We had TVs in our class that were running PowerPoints. And Shane was even more squirrely than normal in this class. And he was kind of giddy and giggly, and you could tell that something was going on. And what he had did was he turned the volume up really loud on the TV. And for each one of the people that Jehu killed in this bloody purge, whenever he clicked the next point on the PowerPoint, he had put sound on it, and it was like a gunshot sound, and he turned the TV up loud, and it scared us all whenever it went off, and he just thought that was the greatest thing. But uh, no matter how squirrely it was, it stuck with me, and today I'm going to share it with you. So let's do this. Let's open up our Bibles to 1 Kings chapter 19. You might think that I misspoke because I do that a lot, but that's not what happened this time. 1 Kings chapter 19, we're going to go backwards, back into the time when Elijah was the prophet during the time of Ahab. This is where Elijah is running for his life. He's already killed all the prophets of Baal. Ahab's wife Jezebel is coming after him, and he gets really depressed and asks God to just take his life during this time. And here's a separate lesson. Whenever you feel like that, get some sleep, get some food, get some friends, and get back to work. That's what God told Elijah. And so look at verse 16. This is part of the work that God told Elijah he was going to do. 1 Kings 19:16 says, how about this? Let's go to verse 15. The Lord said to him, "Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael to be king over Syria, and Jehu, the son of Nimshi, you shall anoint to be king over Israel. And Elisha, the son of Shaphat of Abel Maholah, you shall anoint to be prophet in your place. So let's do this. Since this is the first time that we learn about Jehu, God said long before the events that we're going to be talking about today to Elijah, this is going to be the guy who's going to take care of the problem in the north in Israel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight Jehu, the son of Nimshi. He's going to get a red highlight because he's eventually going to be a king of Israel. He's not yet. I'm not going to give him the full treatment just yet. But this is where we first see Jehu. And what I'm going to write next to him is go to 2 Kings 9, 1 and 2. So we've met Jehu, and we're going to have to jump all the way to 2 Kings chapter 9 in order to start reading about the Jehu story. So let's do that. Let's go to 2 Kings chapter 9. It's one click on my Bible software, but I have to turn the page in my Bible. And when you get there, 2 Kings chapter 9 and verses 1 and 2, let's read that. Then Elisha the prophet called one of the sons of the prophets and said to him, tie up your garments, take this flask of oil in your hand, and go to Ramoth Gilead. When you arrive, look there for Jehu the son of Jehoshaphat, son of Nimshi, and go in and have him rise from among his fellows, and lead him to an inner chamber, and then take the flask of oil and pour it on his head, and say, thus says the Lord, I anoint you king over Israel. Then open the door and flee. Do not linger. So this is where we start to find out about Jehu and his story. So I'm going to go ahead and do that here. I'm going to say Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat, son of Nimshi. I'm doing that. The reason I haven't done the son of up to this point, but the reason I'm doing Jehu, the son of Nimshi, is because if you just do a real quick search, there are a handful of Jehus throughout the Old Testament. And so this is Jehu, the son of Nimshi. I'm going to highlight him red. And I think that I would like to know that God told Elijah back in 1 Kings 19 that this was set in stone, like this is the fulfillment of prophecy. And so I'd like to know that, since I'm about, let's see, I'm 9 chapters in now, and there's 22 chapters in 1 Kings, so I'm like 11 chapters down the road. I'm probably not going to remember that 6 months from now. So I'm going to write next to Jehu the son of Nimshi here, I'm going to write from 1 Kings 19:16 in the margin of my Bible. And I'm going to write number 11 because he's the 11th king of Israel. I know that because he's red. And he is going to start a new dynasty for us. We haven't done that for just a little bit. I'm going to write 6th dynasty. The dynasty thing is going to get pretty prominent here. There's going to be a lot of killing that takes place after Jehu's dynasty, and so we've made it to 6 with big gaps in between, but those gaps are going to get smaller. I'm also going to do something underneath this. This is what the margin of my Bible looks like. From 1 Kings 19:16, number 11, 6th dynasty, and I'm also going to write this because this is the title that Shane taught me in 1999, and it's the title that I have taught other people since then, and it sticks in my head, and it's good to remember what I'm about to do. So I'm going to write that right here in the margin of my Bible. Jehu's bloody purge. So, if you would like to do one more thing before we get to Jehu's bloody purge and what this video is about, go down to 2 Kings chapter 9 and about verse 6. I'm going to highlight this in yellow because this is what God has commissioned Jehu to accomplish. let's start reading in verse 6. I'm not going to highlight all of verse 6, but let's start there. So he rose and he went to the house, and the young man poured the oil on his head like he was told just a minute ago. And he said to him, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I anoint you king over the people of the Lord, over Israel, and you shall strike down the house of Ahab your master, so that I may avenge on Jezebel the blood of my servants the prophets, and the blood of all the servants of the Lord. For the whole house of Ahab shall perish, and I will cut off from Ahab every male, bond and free, in Israel." And then it says a little bit more about that. But here's what I would like to do. How about in about verse 7 here? This is the mission. When I look down at my page and I'm just trying to see an outline or a big picture of the thing that we're looking at, this is what I need to see. God has put Jehu in place, verse 7, for this reason. You shall strike down the house of Ahab. That's going to be yellow in my Bible. And if you want, in verse 8, this is not in my actual physical Bible. I'm going to do it on the screen, and I think it would be just fine to do it in your physical Bible because it makes a really good point. But in verse 8, it kind of says the same thing. The whole house of Ahab shall perish. That's going to get a yellow also. So Jehu's bloody purge is him accomplishing that mission. And what I'm going to do from this point forward is a red underline, and I'm going to write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in the margin of my Bible. So here is going to be the goal. I'm just going to hold my Bible up, and I'm going to look at my page, and I'm going to say, okay, just looking down at my page, I can tell you what Jehu did. Number 1, he killed Joram. That's going to be Ahab's son, who's king in Israel. He killed Joram. He killed Ahaziah. That Ahaziah is the Ahaziah in Judah, who is Athaliah's son, with Joram, king of Judah. So he kills Joram. He kills Ahaziah. He kills Jezebel. He kills the 70 sons of Ahab in Samaria. He strikes down all of Ahab's close friends and relatives. He strikes down all the relatives of Ahaziah. He kills everybody associated with Ahab. He kills all the prophets of Baal and the worshipers and his priests, everybody associated with that, and he wiped out Baal from Israel. And I can go through 1, 2, 3, 4 different pages and give you that list because it's underlined and numbered in my Bible. So let's do that right now. Go down to 2 Kings chapter 9, and how about verse 14? 2 Kings 9 and verse 14. Oh, I'm sorry, 24. 2 Kings 9:24. Jehu drew his bow with his full strength and shot Joram between the shoulders, so that the arrow pierced his heart and he sank in his chariot. I don't want to just know, like I'll show you what I did in my Bible. It would be fine if you wanted to just underline Joram in red, but I like to know a little bit of the circumstances whenever I glance down at my page. So I'm going to do this in red. I'm going to do shot Joram between the shoulders. And that is going to get a red underline. And next to that in the margin of my Bible, I can't do this on my page right now on my computer screen. But what I do is I just have with my red pen 1, and the 1 is circled. So I'm looking down at the page. Jehu shot Joram between the shoulders, and this is his first kill. Jump down to verse 27. When Ahaziah, king of Judah, saw this, he fled in the direction of Beth-haggan, and Jehu pursued him and said, "Shoot him also." And they shot him in the chariot. So, verse 27, Ahaziah is going to get a red underline, just the word Ahaziah. If you wanted, I think it might not. You know what? I'm going to do this right now. I'm going to do this in red underline. Ahaziah, the king of Judah, since there's two Ahaziahs and they're both about the same period of time. Ahaziah, king of Judah, and next to him I'm going to write number 2 in Jehu's bloody purge. And I told you I want just a little bit more information to jump off the page at me. At the end of verse 27, it says, "And they shot him in the chariot." Red underline. So Ahaziah, king of Judah, is dead. Jump down to verse 30. 2 Kings chapter 9 and verse 30. When Jehu came to Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it. And so this is going to be the end of Jezebel. Let's see, how do I do this? Jezebel is going to get a red underline. She's going to be number 3. Red number 3 in the margin of my Bible so that I can see that she's the third person who dies. And the description of her death is in verse 33. He said, this is what Jehu yells up, "Throw her down." So they threw her down, and some of her blood spattered on the wall and on the horses, and they trampled her. So I'm going to just do this. So they threw her down. She got killed as God told her she was going to get killed, by getting thrown out of a window, and her blood got licked up. She is not a good guy, and so she doesn't die like a good guy. Chapter 10 and verse 1. This one's going to be just a little bit broken up. And chapter 10 and verse 1, these are the people who are going to get killed. It says, Ahab had 70 sons in Samaria. They're going to get a red underline, and they get a number 4. And you kind of got to read, there's a little bit more. It's a long paragraph here that describes this whole section. But if you jump down to verse 7, I can see on my page that this is where the thing happens. Verse 7, as soon as the letter came to them, they took their king's sons and slaughtered them, 70 persons, and put their heads in a basket and sent them to Jezreel. So they took the king's sons and slaughtered them, 70 persons. I'm going to stop there, but I feel a little bit tempted to keep going and put their heads in a basket and sent them to them in Jezreel. I just want to keep this as clean and neat as possible. So when I turn my page, I say, Ahab had 70 sons in Samaria. Those sons got killed. That's number 4. Jump down to verse 11. Verse 11. This is like cleanup, but it's going to get a separate number for me. So Jehu struck down all who remained of the house of Ahab in Jezreel, and there's not just his 70 sons, all his great men and his close friends and his priests, until he left none remaining. That whole thing is going to get noted. All of verse 11. It's going to get a red underline. It's going to get a number 5. You might need to hit pause if I'm moving too quick here until you can underline and write in the margin of your Bible. Jump down to verse 13. Jehu met the relatives of Ahaziah, king of Judah. Remember that this entire thing is aimed at cleaning up Ahab and Jezebel's mess. Ahab had a daughter, Athaliah, and Athaliah's son is Ahaziah in the south. And so Ahaziah and everybody connected to him is attached to this mess. And so where are we? Verse 13. Jehu met the relatives of Ahaziah, king of Judah. That's going to get a red underline, and it's going to be number 6 in the margin of my Bible. Uh-oh. I hope that hasn't happened every time since. Probably it has. 6. I'll have to go back and clean that up. What happened to the relatives of Ahaziah, king of Judah, in verse 14? They said, take them alive, and they took them alive and slaughtered them at the pit. Red underline. That's what happened to the relatives of Ahaziah. Go down to verse 17. When he came to Samaria, he struck down all who remained to Ahab in Samaria till he had wiped them out, according to the word of the Lord that he spoke to Elijah. That is exactly the thing that we've been reading about up to this point. Prophecy has been fulfilled, and so you might want to do something with that verse just so you can see. Look, Jehu has done the thing that God told him to do, but he's not done yet. In verse 18, then Jehu assembled all the people and said to them, Ahab served Baal a little, but Jehu will serve him much. So you thought that Ahab was a Baal worshiper. You just wait and see what I do. He's lying. He's not telling the truth here. He said, I'm going to serve Baal. So if you're connected to Baal, come here to this great party that I'm going to throw, and we're going to worship Baal. Verse 19, now therefore, call to me all the prophets of Baal, all his worshippers, and all his priests. Let none be missing, for I have a great sacrifice to offer to Baal. Whoever is missing shall not live. So I'm going to do this. Starting in verse 19, this is what's going to get the red underline for me. All the prophets of Baal, all his worshippers, and all his priests, let none be missing. Red underline. And that's number 7. Then you go down to verse 25, and verse 25 is where the deed gets done. So as soon as he had made an end of the offering and burnt offering, Jehu said to the guard and the officers, go in and strike them down. Let not a man escape. So when they put them to the sword, the guard and the officers cast them out, went into the inner room of the house of Baal, and they burned down the pillar of the house of Baal. So verse 25, this is what's going to get the description for me. Go in and strike them down. Let not a man escape. Let me go back. I want the quotation marks in that. Go in and strike them down. Let not a man escape. So I'm looking down at the page, and this is kind of important for me because in my Bible there's a page break here. All the prophets of Baal, all his worshippers, all his priests, let none be missing. That's going to be number 7. And you can see where they actually get killed in verse 25. They get struck down. Let not a man escape. And so that is Jehu's bloody purge. There's a couple things that I want to finish with on this, though. Number 1, in verse 28, 2 Kings chapter 10 and verse 28. Thus Jehu wiped out Baal from Israel. That is good. I remember, these are the kinds of things that trip people up sometimes. I'm not going to highlight that in green because a green highlight in this section of the Bible means a king in Judah. Thus Jehu wiped out Baal from Israel is going to get a green underline. So Ahab and Jezebel brought Baal and his worshippers and his priests and his worship, all of this stuff. He brought Baal into Israel. And God calls Jehu and essentially says, it's your job to clean it out. And he did. And that's good. We want to know that. But there's a but, unfortunately. In verse 29, ignore my highlighting there. We're not to that part yet. So just pretend like that's not there. I'm going to read right now. I'm going to read verses 29 to 31. And I'm not going to be able to do this on the computer, but I'm going to read it and then I'll show you how I marked it out. Because Jehu, man, he's nasty. He's a killer. He went through and just wiped out all of these people, but he did it because God told him to do it, and that's good. And we're like, yes, good job, Jehu. You cleaned out Baal from Israel and you did what God told you to do. But, verse 29, but Jehu did not turn aside from the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, which he made Israel to sin, that is, the golden calves that were in Bethel and in Dan. And the Lord said to Jehu, because you have done well in carrying out what is right in my eyes, and have done to the house of Ahab according to all that was in my heart, your sons of the fourth generation shall sit on the throne of Israel. But Jehu was not careful to walk in the law of the Lord, the God of Israel, with all his heart. He did not turn from the sins of Jeroboam, which he made Israel to sin. So, you could probably do a couple different things here if you wanted. You could underline this in red. Don't do this yet. Wait and see what you want to do. Jehu did not turn aside from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. That's a description of him. Verse 31 is a good description of him. Jehu was not careful to walk in the law of the Lord, the God of Israel, with all his heart. He did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. That could get a red underline because that's a pretty good description. But here's what I've done in my Bible, and I think you should do it too because it works really good. I just took my red pen and made a bracket. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this or not. See the red bracket around verses 29 to 32, that whole thing. And then I wrote with a red pen next to it, Jehu's sin. I don't want to underline an entire paragraph in red underline, so a red bracket works better for that. And I can tell what it is because it's written in red in the margin of my Bible. This is Jehu's sin. So, we have finished Jehu's bloody purge, and I'm sad to say that I have not lived up to Shane's example, and I didn't have any sounds and bullet sound effects for each one of the people that Jehu murdered. We are going to do our next video on Jehu's descendants, and so we're going to go, as you just read, to the fourth generation, and this is going to be a really big deal. In the next video, not only are we going to get to the high point of Israel's history, at least the economic, that's like the next high point on that roller coaster chart is the golden age of Israel. We're going to start to introduce some prophets, and so we're going to start talking about Jonah, Amos, and Hosea during this time. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.